How are you lovely people doing today? My name is John. Welcome to a beautiful episode of the Zombie Storyline Q&A. This is the only series on YouTube where I take your questions about the zombie storyline and answer them. Whether you have a big, a small, or a simple question, I'm more than happy to answer it. So either leave your questions down below or you can tweet me with them at JohnnyJ25, and maybe while you're there, leave me a follow, hint hint. That'd be always much appreciated. Either way though, you may be in the next episode. So that's how this series works. Without further ado though, let's get rocking and rolling. So for today's episode, we have a question from Raimundo Vaquez, who asks, what is Leroy's story? So Leroy doesn't necessarily have a story. In fact, Leroy doesn't even have a name. Leroy is just a nickname. Some people call him Huck, some people call him Finn, some people call him Leroy, some people call him the big guy. The COD Wiki refers to him as the giant. If you look into the code, he's referred to as Sloth. He doesn't really have a name, and Sloth is the closest thing we can give him to a name, and the reason is because he was such a last-minute addition to Buried. As we learned from developers talking about the development process of Buried and various leaks, he was a very last-minute addition. The map was pretty much complete when they decided to throw him in. They could have released it as is without the big guy, and there wouldn't be too many changes. They pretty much had all the set in stone, and he was so last-minute that they didn't even have time to give him a story or a name, and that's just kind of how it is. He's just there, and as a result of timing, he doesn't have much of a backstory. Now, that doesn't mean we can't do a little bit of speculation, and that doesn't mean that Treyarch can't go back and add a story to him. What we can understand is based on his behavior. One of the things you'll notice is that sometimes he says Richtofen, and that makes us think that he has some kind of connection to Richtofen. Now, I do not mean to suggest, and do not take this way, that he ever worked with Richtofen or ever met Richtofen. I do not think that. I do not think he was ever a test subject. Do not go and spread that as a theory. That is probably not the case. But he has some kind of connection to Richtofen. My guess would be that he can actually hear Richtofen in much the same way that, say, Stuhlinger can hear Richtofen, possibly to maybe being a little bit zombified, or maybe just prolonged exposure to element 115, which would be my best guess. Another thing you'll notice about him is that he also hates the vulture aid gas, just like the zombies, which makes me think a little bit more that maybe he does have a little bit of zombification to him. He runs away from the gas. He hates the smell. We don't know why the zombies run away from the gas, but both Leroy and the zombies avoid this vulture aid gas, the smell, whatever it exactly is. We can't say for sure. So there could be a possibility that he was a resident of the town, got locked in the cell when the events went down that resulted in the town going underground, and then was maybe zombified a little bit, or maybe they put him in the cell because he was showing some signs of zombification, and somehow he just grew massive. Like, we have no idea why he is so big, and we have no idea how he got the way he is, and why he avoids this, why he doesn't really, notice the zombies, or why he doesn't really do much. He only responds to stimuli whenever you give him alcohol or candy. That's how he works. He's a very primitive brain. It's really, there's not much to say about him. He is. Is there a possibility that he's a little bit zombified? Yes, but if that's the case, why is he more inclined to attack zombies than us? Like, he doesn't hurt us, he only helps us, but he will hurt the zombies if you give him some candy. So that makes us think he can't entirely be a zombie. But maybe he is a zombie, but just something is stopping him from being a complete zombie. Like, it's hard to say for sure. There really isn't much of a story behind him, and we can only speculate based on his behavior. Moving on, we have a question from Sassin Gabby, who asks, what if the Shadow Man is the Mexican test subject? So, if you follow me on Twitter today, you'll know that I received tons of questions about the Mexican test subject, and it's starting to get on my nerves. I mean, we know absolutely nothing about the Mexican test subject. The Mexican test subject was mentioned offhandedly 5 or 6 years ago in a radio message, and we've since heard nothing about him. Yet I still get hundreds of questions about this dumb Mexican test subject. Everybody wants to know who the hell this man is. But if we haven't heard about him in 6 months and he was mentioned once offhandedly, He's pretty insignificant, so insignificant in fact that he doesn't even warrant a question, but this just keeps popping up, and he was literally half the questions on the previous episode. We know nothing about the Mexican test subject, and in fact we know so little that he is irrelevant to the storyline. He was just some test subject that died in the process, and him being the Shadow Man is preposterous just because of how insignificant he is. We're gonna end today's episode with a question from Bullfrog, who asks, what happened to Sal, Billy, Finn, and Al after you break the cycle in Mob of the Dead? So this is a very good question, because what this does is spur a little bit of interesting discussion and debate, and we may be entering down some dark rabbit holes by bringing up this question, but I thought I would propose it anyway. So our 4 characters are trapped in some kind of purgatory, and once the Weasel gets his revenge, their purgatory ends, and this begs the question, where do they go? Do they go a level further down to hell? And if that's the case, what is really the purpose of them going through that purgatory torture? Do they go to heaven? Have they been redeemed for their sins, or at least has the Weasel now that he's gotten his revenge? Or do they enter just a realm of nothing? Do they seek to exist? And I think this will be an important question to explore as Zombies goes on, when we consider that Treyarch is entering this rabbit hole again, just with 4 new characters on the map Shadows of Evil, this time throwing in the Shadow Man, who sort of seems to be the puppet master of all of this, kind of in the same way that that demonic voice in Mob of the Dead was the puppet master of that purgatory. And it'll be a pretty interesting question to ask once we play Shadows of Evil. What is beyond this purgatory? Does nothing happen, or do they go to hell and await further torture? We're not exactly sure. Of course, you can answer that question with your own beliefs and theology, but just sort of like objectively speaking, it's hard to say for sure, but I look forward to finding out in the coming months. I think that is something we will learn. Anyway, that's gonna wrap things up. If you enjoyed this video or found it interesting, maybe give it a like or possibly subscribe. I upload multiple episodes of the Zombie Storyline Q&A every week, and if you enjoyed this one, I'm sure you'll love the next one. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and bye.